another one by Himmler. You know what was his sacred book I read? He all the time had a special leather-bound copy in his pocket, Bhagavad Gita. He said his problem was this one. He puts it perfectly. Nazi officers have to do SS horrible things. How to enable them to do it without themselves becoming horrible beings? His solution was Oriental wisdom. To learn to act from distance, I am not really there, and this was the shock of my life. Based on this, do you know the book? I found a book, the guy then wrote many books, Brian Victoria, Zen at War. It's a shocking book, especially horrible for many so-called anti-Eurocentrists who claim our monotheism is guilty of everything, we need Oriental. Yeah, but that book is about apart from a couple of exceptions, the behavior of Zen Buddhist community in Japan in the 30s, early 40s. Not only they totally supported Japanese expansion into China, they even provided properly Zen Buddhist justification for it.
Okay, let's take it a completely different direction maybe. One thing I thought was really interesting towards the end was how Žižek brought up, I felt a little bit vindicated because he brought up how a lot of these like Eastern philosophies can be used to justify all kinds of atrocities and violence. Briefly, his argument was like he brought up how Zen Buddhists supported like Japanese imperialism to a large degree, and how you can use that kind of mentality of like distancing yourself from like I guess the veil of illusion, you might call it, and just going with the flow of things to allow yourself to basically be a very effective soldier, to carry out great violence and all these things. I thought that was really interesting and very topical to what we discussed a few weeks ago. So I was wondering if Kurt and Katie, if that brought up any, if you guys had thoughts on that.
I did.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Kurt.
Okay. Actually, it makes me think of one of my teachers, a Buddhist. Actually, somebody asked him about this clip where the Dalai Lama swatted a mosquito, and the teacher said to us, it's good because the mosquito goes to nirvana more quickly. And I didn't call him up on it, but internally I was like, that doesn't sound right. Like you would never use that logic to say you should go around like killing people.
Osho kind of did. Like we talked about Osho in a recent episode too, and he basically made the argument that if a child is born and is like disabled, like is blind, or and you think blindness isn't even really like the most serious disability you can possibly have, even though it's definitely a big challenge. But he was basically like, you kill the child and then the soul can be reincarnated in a healthy body. And I was like, whoa.
Yeah. Well, I've heard that. I mean, you also hear like Jim Jones used Christian doctrine and said like, it's okay. Like just put the children deserve peace. They just put them to sleep and they'll go to heaven. You know? I think that like you can use almost any spiritual philosophy to justify murder. And that's why it's like, you have to, if you're getting into an ideology, particularly like a spiritual ideology or something that invokes God or like truth or these heavy ideas, you have to be able to like take a step back and be here in the now and think like, are these actually the effects that we want? Because you can use beautiful belief systems to justify horrible things. I do think that Eastern philosophy, though, in particular, like Zen Buddhism, and if you get into meditation and you're able to kind of go into your breath and detach from the here and now and recognize yourself as part of the flow of the universe, that's an extremely useful tool for being able to overcome any kind of fear, any kind of anxiety, any kind of anything. And it is, as he said, I could imagine that if you trained soldiers in Zen Buddhism, it would be a useful tool for getting them to be able to overcome their empathy and be able to kill somebody. Because you can see Žižek said, like, you see yourself as part of, as an actor in the dance of the universe, and like, oh, look at all these molecules and billions of years of flow coming together to drive my knife into your chest. Like, I can see how somebody could do that. But I don't think that that's a criticism of meditation or Zen philosophy so much as it's like, look at how these tools are powerful. Be careful.
Yeah, it makes me think also taking peyote. So peyote, of course, it can be a medicine. It can open your mind and help you see things and, you know, shed your previous beliefs and get a whole new perspective. But traditionally, they did use it for battle. So you eat a couple of buttons and go into battle, and you start to, you know, your eyes will get brighter and you'll see things more clearly. And you probably also go into some sort of rapture, like emotionally intense moments while you're beating the crap out of people.
Yeah, you know, I almost saw that part as kind of like I mean, it definitely seemed like at least like an attack on sort of Eastern philosophy, or maybe put a different way, it seemed like kind of an attack on nihilism and maybe dissociating from yourself too much, which I think Peterson would totally agree with. And I think they both kind of agreed, like, yeah, you know, it's dangerous to kind of detach from your own experience too much, and you should try to I don't know, like build up the amount of meaning in your life so that you can stay connected to your experience.
Yeah, I think that this kind of goes back to how we talked about before. Like, if you detach and realize that you can do anything, you can say, I can do anything, or you can have somebody use it to say, oh, you can do anything. Like, you can do anything really depraved. But I don't think that the tool of detachment is necessarily bad. I think it's about how it's wielded.
Yeah, exactly. It's a tool, not a toy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me of what Peterson, it seems like one antidote for some of these things could be like what Peterson was saying at the beginning, where like most ideas are wrong, and a truly sophisticated thinker will recognize that, will regard most of their ideas that way. So even if you're like really into Eastern philosophy and you're like, well, it's, you know, it's all the veil of Maya, and why don't I blah, blah, blah. If you're regarding your viewpoint with a little bit of like detachment, where you're like, well, it might not all be the veil of Maya, or like this baby might not reincarnate, so I shouldn't, you know, kill it or whatever. Like, it seems like that could be an antidote to some of the worst excesses of, because, you know, every ideology has its worst excesses or ways that you can take it in destructive ways. So.
Yeah. Well, it's also, it's like if you take a single rule out of the philosophy and then you say, oh, okay, so I kill the child and it's going to be reincarnated. But hang on, that's not where it would end, not in Hinduism, not in Buddhism. Like, if you kill the child, you're responsible for that. That's your karma. So you can't just like shut that out and pretend that's not involved somehow. Like, if you end the life of a conscious being.
Yeah, that's interesting. And that's kind of where you get into the danger of like Peterson makes a distinction between religion and ideology, because he'll say like religion is these like large like superstructures that have evolved like through the millennia, and they generally like they're archetypally rich, so they'll have looked at these things from multiple different perspectives. So you have all these like mechanisms to like, wait, there's a reason you don't kill the baby. There's like, even though it might seem like from this perspective you do. So it's like it catches all these things. Whereas like ideology, because we don't like, you know, the modern person is like cynical about religion, like religion sucks, but instead we believe in ideologies, which are usually much newer, much shallower, much more one-sided. So you don't quite have the mechanism. Like if you just believe in reincarnation and maybe you've wiped away a lot of Hinduism and Buddhism, that's where it becomes dangerous. Ideologies are like, Peterson calls them parasitic on archetypes. So you take like one archetype, you build a whole big thing around it, but it's completely unbalanced.
I think that makes sense. I don't know. Like, do you think that You said that you felt vindicated when Žižek criticized this Zen Buddhism, like transformed into an ideology, maybe rather than a philosophy or a religion. Do you think that, do you believe that Buddhism or Eastern philosophies are like particularly detrimental? Like I think that any religion where you believe in an afterlife, you can use that belief in an afterlife to justify killing. Anything where you see like anything where you see yourself as like part of a dance in like this grand universal scheme, if you believe that God or the universe is on your side and that there's an afterlife for the victim, you can use that to justify it very easily. And that's basically any religion. And you see basically every religion justify war all the time.
I wouldn't necessarily like, I guess when I said I felt vindicated, I was kind of joking, but I was also referring to our Kaufman episode that we did a few weeks ago where I was kind of arguing that like viewing everything as an illusion or as a game and as like, or as life as like a canvas where without moral obligation was like a very dangerous position. And it seemed like Žižek was kind of arguing the same thing, but probably articulating it better than me. So I was feeling vindicated, I guess, a little bit. But I think to answer your question, like I don't think that like that perspective that Žižek was arguing against, or well, he was arguing against actual Zen Buddhism, but probably taken to a negative ideological imbalanced place. I think more the thing I was arguing against was maybe like you call it like neo-Buddhism or like neo-Taoism, which is like I think it kind of was like what I was referring to before is like when people take I think that they do it with people do it with Christianity too, but like less probably consciously of where it's coming from, where you reject the religion, you don't feel the need to study the religion. You feel above studying the religion, I guess, but you take certain elements of it. And, you know, when people talk about karma, but they don't know much about Hinduism, or when people will talk about, they'll take small elements of the religion without actually knowing what the context is. And then I think that's when things can be dangerous.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I do see how things could get hairy there. Like that probably applies to me pretty perfectly, but I don't know. I can see how it could get hairy. Like if you don't ground yourself and you take on some kind of a powerful spiritual belief and you don't ground it in a lot of context or in a lot of like skepticism, I think it can go very, very wrong. I did as soon as I saw that come up though, I started laughing and thinking, oh my God, this is exactly what Ariel was saying a couple of weeks ago. So that episode will be coming out on Monday. Tune in for that.